In a luxurious Prague venue overlooking the Vltava River, a seemingly devoted corporate wife was about to overhear the conversation that would destroy her world. What started as a routine company anniversary party took a shocking turn when she came face to face with her husband's cruel betrayal. Elena Martinez wasn't your typical expatriate spouse. For 2 years, she had spent her life secretly mastering Czech as an anniversary surprise. Known for her diplomatic precision and hidden steel, when she encountered David speaking intimately in Czech, she had no idea she was walking into her own transformation. Elena's response would lead to strategic warfare that would dismantle everything he'd built on lies. What began as perfect deception would become perfect revenge. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Elena Martinez adjusted her emerald silk dress and surveyed the glittering corporate party from the terrace of Prague's most exclusive venue. The Vltava River stretched below like black velvet, punctuated by the golden lights of Charles Bridge. She'd perfected this role over 5 years: the supportive wife, the charming conversationalist, the cultural bridge between David's American ambition and Prague's old-world sophistication. "Mrs. Novak, your husband's presentation was brilliant," gushed a colleague's wife in heavily accented English. Elena smiled warmly, though the name still felt like wearing someone else's clothes. She'd kept Martinez professionally, but taken Novak socially, another compromise in the architecture of their Prague life. "David works so hard," Elena replied, her practiced response flowing naturally. The expansion into Eastern European markets has been his passion project. Across the room, David held court near the bar, his 6-foot frame commanding attention as he gestured expansively. His Czech heritage had opened doors here that pure American ambition never could. The Prague tech scene respected legacy, and David's grandmother's stories had become his currency. Elena excused herself and moved toward the champagne station, her years of diplomatic training serving her well. She'd given up a promising career at the UN for this life, trading New York's energy for Prague's beauty, her own ambitions for David's trajectory. Most days, she convinced herself it was worth it. The evening air carried the scent of linden trees as she stepped onto the quieter side terrace. She needed a moment away from the performance, away from the endless questions about children and her hobby of cultural consulting. Through the French doors, she could see David laughing with colleagues, his hand resting casually on someone's arm. That someone was Klara Svobodova from marketing. 28, blonde, everything Elena had been when she'd met David. Elena had noticed her husband's attention lingering on the younger woman, but dismissed it as harmless appreciation. Trust had been the foundation of their marriage. Trust and the belief that their love transcended the mundane temptations of midlife. The voices drifted from around the corner of the terrace, intimate and low. Czech words, musical and familiar after 2 years of secret study. Elena had planned to surprise David for their 7th anniversary next month, imagining his delight when she could finally converse with his grandmother in her native tongue. She'd spent countless hours with language apps, private tutors, and Czech films with subtitles. "Nudna vi posteli. Úplná nudna." David's voice, speaking Czech with the confidence of someone who believed himself unheard. "Boring in bed. Completely boring." Elena's champagne glass trembled in her hand. She pressed herself against the stone wall, her heart hammering as understanding flooded through her. "Ona neví o nás nic?" Klara's voice, breathy with amusement. "And she knows nothing about us?" "Elena je naivní, myslí si, že sem dokonalý manžel." David's laugh cut through Elena like glass. "Elena is naive. She thinks I'm the perfect husband." The conversation continued, each word a surgical strike. David describing their intimate life with casual cruelty, detailing Elena's attempts to reconnect physically, mocking her trust. Klara giggling about the stupid American wife who bought David's business trip excuses, who never questioned his late nights or weekend conferences. "Uz osm mesiku a poradna tusi," Klara purred. 8 months, and she still has no clue. Elena's body went cold despite the warm evening. 8 months. While she'd been planning anniversary surprises and learning his language, David had been building an entirely separate life. The secret Czech lessons that were meant to be her gift had become her weapon of understanding, her accidental key to a truth she'd never suspected. Možná bych se s ní měl rozvést, David mused. Maybe I should divorce her. Proč spěcháš? Má dobré peníze z rodiny a ty potřebuješ americké občanství. Why rush? She has good family money, and you need the American citizenship. Elena closed her eyes, the world tilting beneath her feet. She was a convenience. A beautiful, naive convenience who funded David's lifestyle while he found his excitement elsewhere. The voices grew closer. Elena moved silently back toward the main terrace, her mind operating with sudden crystalline clarity. Every instinct screamed at her to confront them, to shatter David's smug confidence with the revelation of her understanding. But something deeper, more calculating, held her back. She had an advantage they didn't know about. Information was power, and she intended to use every bit of it. Elena returned to the party, her smile perfectly in place, her conversation as charming as ever. But behind her eyes, something fundamental had shifted. The trusting wife was gone, replaced by a woman who understood exactly what kind of war had been declared upon her. She would not be David's naive victim. She would be his most dangerous opponent. Elena stared at her laptop screen in the pre-dawn darkness of their apartment, David sleeping soundly beside her. 3 days had passed since the party, and she'd maintained her performance flawlessly while conducting her own private investigation. The cultural consultant skills that David dismissed as a hobby were proving invaluable now. Her browser tabs told the story of her transformation: Prague divorce lawyers, Czech property law, digital forensic specialists. She'd approached her research with the same methodical precision she'd once used for UN cultural assessments, building profiles and strategies with clinical detachment. Viktor Svoboda's name topped every list. Prague's most ruthless divorce attorney, known for his surgical precision in dismantling marriages and his particular talent for uncovering hidden assets. His success rate was legendary, his fees astronomical, his reputation unforgiving. Perfect. Elena's phone buzzed, a WhatsApp call from Isabella, timed for Elena's early morning and Isabella's late evening in New York. She slipped from bed and padded to the kitchen, accepting the encrypted call. "You look like hell," Isabella said without preamble, her dark eyes sharp with concern on the small screen. At 31, Elena's younger sister possessed all the fire that Elena had learned to bank over the years. Isabella had never liked David, never understood Elena's willingness to sublimate her career for his. "I haven't been sleeping well," Elena whispered, mindful of David in the next room. "Something's wrong. You've had that look since we were kids, like you're planning to burn down the playground." Isabella leaned forward. "What did the pendejo do now?" Elena almost smiled at her sister's reflexive use of Spanish profanity. "He's having an affair. For 8 months. I overheard him talking about it in Czech." Isabella's expression darkened. "Czech? How did you—" "Wait, the language lessons. The anniversary surprise." Understanding flooded her features. "Dios mío, Elena, I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be strategic." Elena's voice carried a new edge that made Isabella sit back. "I need legal advice. Hypothetically, what would you do if you were married to someone in a foreign country and they were hiding assets?" Hypothetically? Isabella's lawyer instincts kicked in. Document everything. Bank statements, property deeds, business partnerships. Get a local attorney who knows the system. And Elena, her voice gentled, make sure you're doing this for the right reasons. Revenge can consume you. After ending the call, Elena made coffee and settled at her kitchen table with David's laptop. He'd grown careless over the months, leaving it unlocked while he showered. She photographed bank statements showing transfers to jewelry stores, expensive restaurants, a boutique hotel where she'd never stayed. Each image was methodically organized in a secure cloud folder. The door chimed at 9 sharp. Elena opened it to find an elderly woman with silver hair and intelligent eyes carrying a plate of kolache pastries. Dobry den, Elena, Marie Novikova said warmly. David's grandmother had been Elena's unexpected ally in Prague, the one person in his family who genuinely seemed to care about her well-being. Their weekly tea visits had become a cherished routine, and Marie had unknowingly become Elena's most patient Czech conversation partner. Dobry den, Marie, Elena replied, her pronunciation now flawless after months of practice. Jak se máte? They settled in the living room, Marie pouring tea with practiced elegance. At 78, she'd survived communist rule, the Velvet Revolution, and decades of Prague's transformation. Her sharp eyes missed nothing. David není doma? Marie asked, noting her grandson's absence. He's at the office. Early meeting. Elena kept her voice neutral, though mentioning his lies left a bitter taste. Marie studied her with the intensity of someone who'd learned to read people for survival. Vypadas unavena vsrdci. You look tired in your heart. Elena's composure nearly cracked. Marie's intuition had always been uncanny, but this felt like looking into a mirror. Sometimes marriage is complicated. Mój wnuk není chlopi, ale je pozitili, Marie said carefully. My grandson isn't stupid, but he is foolish. Musi nekti nevidi poklad kteri maji. The old woman's words carried weight beyond their literal meaning. Elena wondered how much Marie suspected, how much she chose not to see. David rarely visited his grandmother, leaving Elena to maintain the relationship that mattered to her more than it ever had to him. After Marie left, Elena made the call that would change everything. Svoboda and Associates, a crisp receptionist answered. I'd like to schedule a consultation with Mr. Viktor Svoboda. It's regarding a divorce matter. Elena's voice was steady, professional, quite complicated. I understand he specializes in challenging cases. Mr. Svoboda only takes cases by referral. May I ask who recommended his services? Elena had prepared for this. Dr. Tomas Klima from Charles University. He mentioned Mr. Svoboda's particular expertise with international marriages and hidden assets. A pause. I can offer you a consultation Thursday at 2 p.m. Please bring all relevant financial documents. I'll be there. Elena ended the call and immediately began organizing her evidence folder. Bank statements, photographs, screenshots of David's social media activity, a timeline of his suspicious behavior. She approached it like preparing for a UN briefing, every detail documented, every angle considered. That evening, David returned home with flowers and wine, his guilt manifesting in uncharacteristic romance. Elena accepted his kisses and compliments with the same warm smile she'd perfected over 5 years, all while calculating the market value of their shared assets. You seem different lately, David said over dinner. More, I don't know, confident? I've been thinking about expanding my consulting work, Elena replied smoothly, maybe taking on some larger cultural projects. I feel like I've been underestimating my own capabilities. David nodded absently, already reaching for his phone. That's great, honey. Whatever makes you happy. Whatever makes you happy. The casual dismissal that had once hurt now seemed almost quaint. David had no idea that his wife's happiness would come at the cost of everything he'd built on lies. As David scrolled through his messages, probably texting Clara, Elena mentally rehearsed her presentation for Viktor Svoboda. Thursday couldn't come soon enough. Viktor Svoboda's law office occupied 3 floors of a meticulously restored Baroque building in Prague's lesser town, its golden stone facade gleaming in the Thursday afternoon sunlight. Elena arrived 15 minutes early, using the time to study the building's architectural details and center herself for what she knew would be a crucial performance. The receptionist, a woman in her 40s with steel gray hair and measuring eyes, escorted Elena through corridors lined with legal tomes and classical art. Everything about the space whispered expensive competence, from the Persian rugs to the subtle scent of leather and old money. Mr. Svoboda will see you now, the receptionist announced. opening heavy oak doors to reveal an office that took Elena's breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Prague Castle, their light illuminating walls lined with legal volumes in multiple languages. A Steinway grand piano occupied one corner, its polished surface reflecting afternoon shadows. This wasn't just a lawyer's office. It was the domain of someone who collected beautiful things and wielded them as psychological tools. Viktor Svoboda rose from behind a massive mahogany desk, and Elena's prepared composure wavered slightly. She'd researched his cases, his reputation, his success rate, but photos hadn't captured the man's physical presence. Tall and lean, with prematurely silver hair and eyes the color of storm clouds, he moved with the predatory grace of someone accustomed to dismantling lives with surgical precision. "Mrs. Novak," he said, his English carrying only the faintest trace of an accent. "Please sit." Elena settled into a leather chair that probably cost more than her monthly consulting income, her portfolio of evidence balanced on her lap. Viktor remained standing, studying her with an intensity that felt like being X-rayed. "Before we begin," he said, switching effortlessly to Spanish, "tell me why you chose not to hire a female attorney. Most women in your situation prefer representation that understands their emotional complexities." The test was obvious. Elena responded in flawless Spanish, her voice steady. "Because I'm not looking for understanding, Mr. Svoboda. I'm looking for results. And because someone who's never lost a case might appreciate the challenge of representing someone who's never lost a war." Viktor's eyebrows rose slightly, the first crack in his professional mask. He switched to Czech, his tone conversational. "Your husband doesn't know you speak Czech, does he?" "Nay," Elena replied smoothly. "David believes many things about me that aren't true. His assumptions have become my advantages." Now Viktor smiled, a sharp expression that transformed his face completely. "Show me what you have." Elena opened her portfolio with the same calm precision she'd once used for diplomatic presentations. Bank statements, photographs, timeline documentation, property records. Each piece of evidence was labeled, cross-referenced, organized with obsessive attention to detail. Viktor examined her work in silence, his expression growing increasingly impressed. When he reached the photographs of David's laptop screen showing intimate messages with Clara, he paused. "You took these yourself?" David has grown careless. He believes his wife is too trusting to investigate, too dependent to leave, too naive to understand the scope of his deception. Elena's voice carried no emotion, only fact. "He's wrong on all counts. The transfers to jewelry stores, the hotel receipts. You've documented 8 months of expenditures." Viktor leaned back in his chair. "This is exceptional work. Most clients come to me with suspicions and tears. You've brought me a complete case file." "I'm not most clients." "No," Viktor agreed, studying her with new interest. "You're not. Tell me, Mrs. Novak, what exactly do you want from this divorce?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Elena had prepared for this question, but sitting in Viktor's office, surrounded by the tools of legal warfare, her answer felt different than it had in her kitchen planning sessions. "I want David to understand that underestimating me was the greatest mistake of his life. I want Clara to realize that her ticket to a better life comes with consequences she never considered. And I want to rebuild my career without the weight of a marriage built on lies." Viktor was quiet for a long moment, his fingers steepled as he considered her words. Czech divorce law heavily favors equal distribution of assets, but there are strategies available when one party has been deceptive about finances or committed adultery. Your documentation would be devastating in court. "But you're not thinking about court, are you?" Elena asked perceptively. "Court is expensive, time-consuming, and public. Your husband's position at a prominent tech firm makes discretion valuable. Sometimes the most effective battles are fought entirely in private." Viktor's smile returned, predatory and pleased. "I think we're going to work very well together, Mrs. Novak." "Elena," she corrected, "and there's one more thing you should know. Which is, I've been documenting this conversation for my own protection. I hope that's not a problem. Victor laughed, a genuine sound of surprised delight. Mrs. Elena, I haven't been surprised by a client in 5 years. You've managed it twice in one meeting. He stood and extended his hand. Elena rose to meet him, their handshake firm and businesslike. I'll have my brother Tomas conduct a comprehensive digital investigation. In my experience, men like your husband always leave more evidence than they realize. Victor's expression grew serious. But I want you to understand something. Once we begin this process, there's no going back. Your marriage, as you knew it, ends today. Elena thought of David's cruel laughter on the terrace, of 8 months of lies, of the future he'd planned without her input or consent. My marriage ended 3 days ago, she said quietly. I'm just making it official. Victor nodded, recognizing something in her tone that spoke to his own experiences with betrayal. Then let's begin. Tomas Svoboda's office occupied the converted basement of his brother's building, a high-tech cave filled with multiple monitors, humming servers, and the organized chaos of a digital forensics expert. At 32, he possessed Victor's intelligence, but none of his cynicism, approaching each case with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely enjoyed solving puzzles. Your husband is spectacularly careless, Tomas announced as Elena descended the stairs, his fingers flying across multiple keyboards simultaneously. 2 days had passed since her meeting with Victor, and Tomas had already uncovered more evidence than Elena's weeks of amateur investigation. How careless? Elena asked, settling into the chair he indicated. The basement smelled of coffee and electronics, a shrine to the digital age's capacity for both connection and surveillance. He uses the same password for everything, the name of his first dog, followed by his grandmother's birth year. He never clears his browser history, his phone automatically backs up to 3 different cloud services, and he has location tracking enabled on all his devices. Tomas pulled up a map of Prague dotted with red pins. I can tell you every restaurant, hotel, and shopping center he's visited with Clara for the past 8 months. Elena studied the map, recognizing expensive establishments she'd never been to, romantic locations David had claimed were boring business venues. Each pin represented another lie, another moment when her husband had chosen deception over honesty. There's more, Tomas continued, bringing up a series of screenshots. He's been using company resources for personal expenses. The corporate credit card shows charges for jewelry, weekend trips, even lingerie from a boutique in Wenceslas Square. If his employer knew, it would be grounds for immediate termination. He's that reckless? Narcissists usually are. They believe they're too smart to get caught, too valuable to face consequences. Tomas's expression darkened. I've seen it before. Men who think their wives are decorative accessories, too dependent to fight back. The reference to dependency stung, because it held truth. Elena had made herself financially reliant on David, had sublimated her career ambitions for his success. The realization that her independence had been slowly eroded by seemingly loving compromises was almost as painful as the affair itself. What about Clara? Elena asked. What do we know about her background? Tomas pulled up a comprehensive profile that would have impressed any intelligence agency. Klara Svobodova, 28, marketing specialist at Innovate Tech Prague. Grew up in Brno, working-class family, scholarship student. She's ambitious, calculating, and deeply insecure about her background. Photos filled the screen. Clara's social media carefully curated to project success and sophistication. Designer clothes, expensive restaurants, cultural events. Elena recognized several locations from David's credit card statements. She's been posting photos of gifts she claims to have bought herself, Tomas continued. The jewelry, the handbags, the weekend trips. She's building a false narrative of financial independence while your husband funds her lifestyle. Elena felt a strange mixture of anger and pity. Clara was using David, just as David was using Elena, but with less subtlety and more desperation. It was a pyramid scheme of emotional manipulation, with Elena providing the foundation for everyone else's fantasies. Her phone buzzed. David calling from work. I should take this, Elena said, putting the phone on speaker with Tomas's nod of approval. Hey, beautiful. David's voice filled the basement, artificially warm. I'm going to be late tonight. Big presentation tomorrow for the Eastern European expansion. Might grab dinner with the team to prep. Elena glanced at Tomas, who was already pulling up David's location data. His phone was currently at a restaurant called Zlata Praha. Expensive, intimate, definitely not a business venue. That sounds important, Elena said, her voice perfectly supportive. Don't worry about dinner. I'll probably just grab something light and work on my Czech lessons. A pause. Czech lessons? Elena's heart raced, but her voice remained steady. I mentioned it last week. I thought it might be helpful for my consulting work, understanding the local culture better. Right. Yeah, that's great, honey. I have to run. Love you. Love you too. Elena ended the call and looked at Tomas, who was grinning with professional admiration. That was beautifully done. You planted doubt without seeming suspicious, tested his reaction to your language study, and gave him enough rope to hang himself with tonight's lies. He pulled up the restaurant's website. Zlata Praha specializes in romantic dinners for two. Their wine list starts at €200 per bottle. All charged to the company card, no doubt. Of course. Want to see something interesting? Tomas brought up a series of text messages recovered from David's deleted files. He's been complaining about you to his colleagues. In Czech, naturally. The messages were brutal in their casual cruelty. David describing Elena as clingy, boring, financially dependent. Jokes about American wives who gave up careers and then became deadweight. References to their physical relationship that made Elena's cheeks burn with humiliation. But what hurt most were the messages to Clara about their future plans. David discussing divorce timelines, asset protection strategies, even potential relocation to Brno, where Clara had family connections. He'd been planning their entire life while Elena planned anniversary surprises. There's something else, Tomas said gently, recognizing the pain in Elena's expression. David's been researching divorce lawyers too. Not good ones, cheap ones. He's been planning to blindside you with a quick, uncontested divorce that would leave you with minimal assets. The basement felt suddenly cold. Elena wrapped her arms around herself, the full scope of David's betrayal finally clear. This wasn't just an affair. It was a coordinated campaign to replace her entirely while leaving her financially devastated. He doesn't know about Victor? Elena asked. No idea. As far as David knows, you're still the trusting wife who believes his business trip stories. Tomas leaned forward conspiratorially. Which gives us an enormous advantage. He's planning a war against someone who doesn't exist anymore, while you're building a case against someone who thinks he's untouchable. Elena stood, her decision crystallizing. How long do you need to complete your investigation? Another week for the full digital forensics report. Bank records, communication logs, location data, social media analysis. Everything admissible in court and devastating in private negotiations. Do it. And Tomas? Elena met his eyes. Thank you for treating this like it matters. It does matter. Your husband made the mistake of underestimating both you and the digital age. In my experience, that combination is usually fatal to marriage and frequently to careers. Elena climbed the stairs back to street level, Prague's afternoon light feeling different than it had an hour ago. She had allies now, evidence, strategy. David's war against her had been conducted in shadows and lies. Hers would be fought in broad daylight, with precision and overwhelming force. Elena chose her outfit with the strategic precision of a general preparing for battle. The midnight blue dress hugged her curves without being obvious, the color bringing out her dark eyes and complementing the silver jewelry David had given her for their 5th anniversary. Ironic, she thought, that his past gifts would arm her for his destruction. Innovate Tech's quarterly cocktail party occupied the top floor of a gleaming office building, Prague's skyline glittering beyond floor-to-ceiling windows. Elena arrived alone. David was supposedly meeting her there, after a late client call that Tomas's surveillance had already proven was dinner with Clara at their usual romantic hideaway. She moved through the crowd with practiced ease, accepting compliments on her appearance and congratulations on David's recent promotion. Everyone knew Elena as the supportive wife, the cultural consultant who helped ease international business relationships. Tonight, she would give them a different impression entirely. Clara stood near the champagne fountain, resplendent in a red dress that Elena recognized from David's credit card statements. The younger woman held court among a group of marketing colleagues, her laugh bright and artificial as she gestured with manicured hands that sported a bracelet Elena had watched David purchase online. Clara, Elena approached with a warm smile, switching seamlessly to English. You look absolutely stunning tonight. That dress is gorgeous. Clara's smile faltered slightly, surprise flickering across her features. In all their previous interactions, Elena had been politely distant, the older wife acknowledging the younger colleague with professional courtesy but no real warmth. Thank you, Clara replied carefully. You look lovely as well. I love your jewelry. David has excellent taste, Elena said, touching her necklace. Though I suspect he learned it from spending time with sophisticated Prague women. The local sense of style is so much more elegant than what I was used to in New York. She let the comment hang in the air, watching Clara process the implications. Elena was establishing herself as David's teacher in matters of elegance, subtly positioning Clara as a student rather than a sophisticate. You must know all the best places in Prague by now. Elena continued conversationally. David mentioned you've been invaluable in helping him understand local culture for the Eastern European expansion. Yes, I've shown him some restaurants, cultural sites. Clara's English carried more accent when she was nervous, Elena noted with satisfaction. Vltava Praha, perhaps? David mentioned having dinner there recently. Such a romantic atmosphere. I've been hoping he'd take me there for our anniversary next month. The color drained from Clara's face. Vltava Praha was their secret place, the intimate restaurant where David took her for their most private moments. Elena's casual mention of it, coupled with the anniversary reference, created a cognitive dissonance that left Clara visibly shaken. I'm not sure about specific restaurants, Clara stammered. Elena leaned closer, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper. Between us, I think David's been working too hard lately. All these late meetings, weekend business trips. I worry he's not taking care of himself properly. A man his age needs to be careful about stress. The phrase, a man his age, was calculated cruelty. David was 36 to Clara's 28, but Elena's phrasing made him sound ancient, a middle-aged man whose stamina and vitality were questionable. She watched Clara's confidence crumble further. Perhaps you could help me plan something special for him, Elena continued, her tone becoming conspiratorial. As someone who works with him daily, you'd know better than anyone what he needs to feel. Energized again. Before Clara could respond, Elena dropped her first Czech phrase with perfect casual timing. Mimochodem, líbí se vám I vaše náramek. By the way, I like your bracelet. The effect was immediate and devastating. Clara's eyes widened in shock, her champagne glass trembling in her hand. Elena had spoken Czech, not the halting attempts of a beginner, but with the fluency of someone who understood every nuance of the language. Vy, mluvite česky? You speak Czech? Trochu, Elena replied modestly, then continued in English. I've been studying for a while. David doesn't know. It's meant to be an anniversary surprise, but I thought since you're Czech, you might help me with pronunciations sometime. I'm particularly interested in understanding local expressions, the kind of intimate phrases couples use with each other. Clara looked like she might be sick. Elena's request was layered with threat. If Elena understood Czech, what else might she have overheard at company parties? What private conversations between Clara and David had been accidentally witnessed? I should find David, Clara said desperately. Let him know you're here. Oh, don't worry about that. He's probably still tied up with that client call. You know how dedicated he is to his work. Elena's smile was radiant and terrifying. We have plenty of time to chat. She guided the conversation back to innocuous topics, but the damage was done. Every question about Prague restaurants could be a trap. Every comment about David's schedule could reveal Elena's knowledge of his lies. Clara was trapped in a conversation that felt like walking through a minefield. When David finally arrived, 30 minutes late and smelling faintly of Clara's perfume, he found his wife charming a group of executives with stories about cultural misunderstandings in international business. Elena looked up at his approach, her face lighting up with apparent joy. "Darling, I was just telling everyone about that funny incident with the Prague castle tour guide. You remember, when the language barrier led to that confusion about the crown jewels?" David smiled uncertainly, having no memory of such an incident. "Of course. You tell it so much better than I do." Elena laughed, the sound bright and musical. "That's because I pay attention to details. You're always so focused on the big picture." She kissed his cheek, inhaling the subtle scent of Clara's perfume mixed with expensive wine. "How was your client call?" "Fine. Productive." David's answer was automatic, distracted. His eyes were searching the room, finding Clara standing near the windows looking pale and shaken. "Wonderful. Success suits you." Elena linked her arm through his, her grip gentle but unmistakably possessive. "I was just having the most interesting conversation with Clara about Prague's restaurant scene. She has such sophisticated taste." David's attention snapped back to his wife, something in her tone, setting off alarm bells he couldn't quite identify. Elena had always been diplomatic, careful with her words. This felt different, more pointed, more knowing. "She's very knowledgeable about the city," he said carefully. "Yes, I gathered that. We must have dinner together sometime, the three of us. I'd love to hear more about her recommendations." Elena's smile could have powered the Prague castle floodlights. "After all, we should know each other better, don't you think? Since we both care so much about your success." The evening continued with Elena performing the role of devoted wife with Academy Award-worthy skill, but David felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. Something had changed in his wife's demeanor, a confidence that hadn't been there before, and Clara's nervous glances across the room suggested their secret might not be as secure as he'd believed. As they walked to their car at evening's end, Elena chatted casually about the party, the conversations, the people they'd met. Normal couple talk that felt anything but normal to David's increasingly paranoid ears. "You seem to really hit it off with Clara tonight," he said, testing. "Oh yes, she's delightful. So young and enthusiastic about life in Prague. I think we're going to be very good friends." Elena's tone was perfectly innocent, but David heard something else underneath. A satisfaction that made his blood run cold. For the first time in 8 months, he wondered if his perfect plan might have a fatal flaw. Elena Martinez was no longer the naive wife he thought he'd married, and that terrified him more than he was willing to admit. The aftermath of Elena's psychological warfare became evident within days. David's phone buzzed constantly with frantic messages from Clara, her paranoia bleeding through even encrypted apps that Tomas monitored with professional satisfaction. "She definitely knows something." Clara's voice trembled through the intercepted call as Elena sat in Victor's office, listening to the recording. The way she spoke Czech, the questions about restaurants. "David, I think she's been watching us." "That's impossible." David's recorded voice carried forced confidence. "Elena barely speaks English properly half the time. She's not smart enough to..." "She knew about Zlata Praha. She knew about my bracelet. How could she know unless..." "You're being paranoid." Elena is exactly what she appears to be. A dependent wife who gave up her career and now fills her time with hobbies. Czech lessons are probably just another way to feel useful. Elena met Victor's eyes across his mahogany desk, both of them recognizing the fatal arrogance in David's assessment. He still believed his own mythology about her, even as evidence mounted that his perfect victim had evolved into his perfect opponent. "He's making mistakes," Victor observed, reviewing Tomas's latest surveillance report. "Leaving his phone unlocked, missing important work meetings, getting careless with company expenses. Fear makes people sloppy." Elena nodded, though part of her felt unexpectedly hollow at David's casual dismissal of her intelligence. After 5 years of marriage, he truly saw her as ornamental, beautiful, dependent, intellectually inferior. The insult cut deeper than the betrayal, because it revealed how completely she'd allowed herself to disappear into his expectations. Her phone rang. Isabella calling from New York during her lunch break. "You sound different." Isabella said immediately after Elena answered. Stronger, but also harder. I'm worried about what this is doing to you. Elena stepped onto Victor's private balcony, Prague's ancient spires stretching beyond the Vltava. I'm fine. Better than fine. I'm finally becoming who I was supposed to be. That's what scares me. The sister I grew up with believed in forgiveness, in seeing the best in people. This new version sounds like she's planning total destruction. Maybe destruction is what's needed. Elena's voice carried an edge that made Isabella go quiet. David has been systematically destroying me for months. My trust, my self-respect, my financial independence. He just did it slowly, with smiles and flowers and lies about loving me. Elena, he told his mistress I was too stupid to discover his affair. He's been using company money to fund their relationship while planning to divorce me and leave me with nothing. This isn't about revenge, Isabella. This is about survival. The silence stretched between New York and Prague, thousands of miles of transatlantic cable carrying Isabella's concern and Elena's transformation. Just promise me you won't lose yourself completely, Isabella finally said. The best revenge isn't becoming like the people who hurt you. That evening, Victor arrived at Elena's apartment with case files and a bottle of exceptional Moravian wine. David was attending another business dinner, actually a romantic evening with Clara at a spa resort outside Prague, complete with couples massage and champagne that would appear on his corporate expense report. We need to discuss strategy, Victor said, but his eyes lingered on Elena in ways that had nothing to do with legal proceedings. She'd changed since their first meeting. More confident, more dangerous, more compelling. Elena poured wine into crystal glasses, hyper-aware of Victor's presence in her intimate space. The apartment felt different with him there, charged with possibilities that had nothing to do with divorce proceedings. David's becoming reckless, she said, settling beside him on the sofa with carefully calculated proximity. Clara's pressure is making him paranoid, which is making him sloppy. Good. Paranoid people make excellent mistakes. Victor's voice was professional, but his eyes dropped to Elena's lips as she spoke. But we need to be careful. If he suspects you're building a case, he won't. David sees what he expects to see, a decorative wife who exists to support his ambitions. Elena leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. He has no idea that his greatest mistake was underestimating me. The space between them crackled with tension that had been building since their first meeting. Victor was brilliant, dangerous, everything David wasn't. Passionate where David was calculating. Intellectually engaging where David was dismissive. Present where David was absent. Elena, Victor's voice was rough. We should maintain professional boundaries until... She kissed him, cutting off his carefully ethical protest. The kiss was hungry, desperate, 3 months of rage and loneliness, and newfound power channeled into a moment of pure want. Victor responded immediately, his professional restraint crumbling as Elena's transformation reached its most dangerous phase. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Elena saw her own reflection in Victor's storm-gray eyes, no longer the accommodating wife, but a woman who took what she wanted. This complicates everything, Victor said, though his hands remained on her face. Good, Elena replied. I'm tired of simple. The next morning brought crisis. David's phone rang at 6 a.m., his boss, demanding an immediate meeting about irregularities in his expense reports. Someone had flagged the romantic dinners, the jewelry purchases, the spa weekends that bore no resemblance to legitimate business expenses. Elena made coffee and watched David pace their kitchen, his confidence finally cracking as consequences materialized. She'd orchestrated nothing. David's carelessness and Clara's pressure had created this crisis entirely on their own. It's probably just an audit, David muttered, but his hands shook as he knotted his tie. Standard corporate procedure. I'm sure you're right, Elena said soothingly, playing the supportive wife while internally calculating how this development would accelerate her timeline. You've always been so careful with business expenses. David left for his meeting looking like a man walking to his execution. Elena waited exactly 30 minutes before calling Victor. It's beginning, she said simply. David's world is starting to collapse, and he has no idea that the foundation was rotten long before I started digging. The war she'd declared in silence 3 weeks ago was finally becoming visible. And Elena discovered that victory, when it came, would taste sweeter than she'd ever imagined. Victor's evidence folder landed on Elena's coffee table with the weight of a judicial sentence. 3 weeks of investigation had produced a dossier that would destroy David's career, reputation, and financial future with surgical precision. "This is enough," Victor said quietly, his voice carrying none of its usual professional detachment. The previous night had changed everything between them, adding personal stakes to what had begun as purely legal warfare. "We can end this cleanly. David will agree to any terms to keep this from becoming public." Elena studied the photographs, bank records, and digital communications spread before her. 8 months of lies documented with devastating clarity. David's corporate expense fraud, his detailed discussions with Clara about divorcing Elena while hiding assets, his casual cruelty about her intelligence and worth, all of it preserved in digital amber. "He called me a burden," Elena said, reading one of the recovered messages. "Dead weight that he carried out of obligation. He told Clara that marrying me was a strategic mistake he needed to correct." Victor watched her face, recognizing the moment when hurt transformed into something harder and more dangerous. He'd seen it before in clients who discovered the true extent of their partner's betrayal. The question was always whether they chose healing or destruction. Elena's phone buzzed. Isabella calling with uncanny timing. "Don't answer it," Victor said gently. "Not until you decide who you want to be when this is over." But Elena was already accepting the call, her sister's concerned face filling the screen. "You look like hell," Isabella said immediately. "And like you're planning something that's going to destroy you along with David." "I'm planning justice." "No, you're planning revenge. There's a difference. And you're smart enough to know it." Isabella's voice carried the authority of someone who'd spent years in courtrooms watching people destroy themselves in pursuit of vindication. "Elena, I know you're hurt. I know David deserves consequences, but look at yourself. Really look. Are you becoming someone you can live with?" Elena caught her reflection in the dark window, perfectly styled, coldly beautiful, calculating. A stranger wearing her face. "He destroyed our marriage while planning to leave me with nothing," Elena said. "He stole from his company to fund his affair. He mocked me to colleagues and strangers alike. What exactly should I forgive?" "I'm not asking you to forgive him. I'm asking you to remember who you were before this consumed you. The sister I grew up with wouldn't recognize the woman I'm talking to now." After ending the call, Elena sat in silence while Victor organized his evidence. The weight of Isabella's words pressed against the armor of anger she'd constructed over the past month. "She's not wrong," Victor said carefully. "Revenge changes people. I've seen it destroy clients who won everything they thought they wanted. And what would you do? In my situation, with this evidence, what would Victor Svoboda do?" Victor was quiet for a long moment, his storm-gray eyes distant. "I'd probably burn everything to the ground and then wonder why the ashes tasted bitter." The honesty in his admission broke something in Elena's chest. She saw herself reflected in his cynicism, recognized the path she was walking toward becoming someone who collected victories instead of building happiness. Her doorbell rang at 9 p.m., Marie Novikova, carrying a thermos of tea and wearing the expression of someone who'd lived through enough wars to recognize the signs of impending battle. "Můžeme si promluvit? Can we talk?" Elena let her in, grateful for the interruption. Marie settled in the living room with the dignity of someone who'd survived communist rule and emerged with her humanity intact. "David Bile, DNESU me," Marie said in Czech. "David came to see me today. Vypadal zufale. Rekl mi ze si myslí, že ho nekdo sle duže." Elena's Czech was fluent enough now to understand perfectly. David had visited his grandmother, desperate and paranoid, convinced someone was watching him. "County JSTE mu rekla?" "What did you tell him?" "Rekla JSEM mu pravdu. Zegdy lzes svět se ti zacne jevit jako nebezpečné místo." I told him the truth. That when you lie, the world begins to seem like a dangerous place. Marie studied Elena with eyes that had seen too much history to be fooled by surface performances. Vis zemuzes mluvit seski. Vis ojeho afere. Avis ze se chista teopustit. Elena nodded, no longer surprised by Marie's intuition. The old woman had always seen more than she revealed. Mamna Weber, Elena said carefully, I have a choice. Ano. Muze stat nekim, kdo rozdava bolest, nebo nekim, kdo si buduje novi život. Yes, you can become someone who deals out pain, or someone who builds a new life. Marie poured tea with steady hands, the simple ritual grounding Elena in something beyond rage and calculation. Moje prvni manzel me opustil behem valki, Marie continued. Utakl smlatsi zenoa nechal me s ničim. Mela JSEM na výběr. Zničit ho nebo zachránit sebe. The choice defined who I became. What did you choose? Zachránila JSEM sebe. A nasla JSEM lepsi lasku s muzem, který si me vazil. I saved myself. And I found better love with a man who valued me. Elena glanced at Victor, who was listening to the Czech conversation with growing understanding. Marie's words carried the weight of lived experience, of someone who'd faced similar crossroads and chosen a path toward healing rather than destruction. After Marie left, Elena and Victor sat in contemplative silence. The evidence folder remained on the coffee table, David's destruction laid out in neat, organized files. We don't have to use all of it, Victor said quietly. We can get you everything you deserve. Financial security, a clean break, your freedom, without destroying him completely. Elena picked up one of the photographs. David and Clara at their romantic restaurant, his hand on her face, both of them laughing at some private joke. The image that had once caused searing pain now felt distant, like looking at strangers. What kind of person does that make me? Elena asked, having the power to destroy him and choosing restraint? It makes you someone who can live with herself afterward, Victor replied, someone who chose healing over winning. Elena thought of Isabella's concern, of Marie's wisdom, of the woman she'd been before rage became her guiding principle. The transformation that had felt like empowerment suddenly seemed more like imprisonment. Not breaking free from David's expectations, but becoming trapped by her own need for vindication. I want him to face consequences, Elena said finally. I want Clara to understand that actions have prices, but I don't want to become someone who deals in destruction. Victor nodded, relief evident in his expression. We can achieve that. Justice without devastation, consequences without annihilation. Elena closed the evidence folder, decision crystallizing. Tomorrow, she would confront David. Not to destroy him, but to reclaim herself. The war she'd been fighting wasn't really against her husband's betrayal. It was against the woman she'd been willing to become in response to it. Elena chose Tuesday evening for the conversation that would end her marriage. David would return from another fabricated business dinner, actually a desperate crisis meeting with Clara about his mounting professional troubles, to find his wife waiting in their living room with the evidence of his deception arranged on the coffee table like a museum exhibit. She'd spent the day in careful preparation, moving through their apartment with the methodical precision of someone documenting a crime scene. Important documents secured, personal items packed, emotional armor firmly in place. By the time David's key turned in the lock at 11 p.m., Elena had achieved the calm that comes from absolute certainty. Elena? David's voice carried exhaustion and barely concealed panic. His meeting with corporate compliance had gone badly. His relationship with Clara was deteriorating under pressure, and his carefully constructed life was developing stress fractures he couldn't explain. In here, Elena called from the living room, her voice steady. David appeared in the doorway, loosening his tie with fingers that trembled slightly. He'd lost weight over the past week, his usual confident bearing replaced by the hunched shoulders of someone under siege. We need to talk, Elena said in English, then switched seamlessly to Czech. Nebobis rad si mluvil v jazyc, kterým si myslis, že nerozumím. The effect was immediate and devastating. David's face went white, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly as the implications crashed over him. Elena speaking fluent Czech meant she'd understood everything. Every cruel comment, every intimate detail shared with Clara, every plan made behind her back. Elena. I can explain. Ne musis nic vysvětlovat, Elena continued in Czech. Rozumím všemu. OSM mesiču. Clara, tvoje plány na rozvod. Tvoje názory na mou inteligenci. Vysvětlím. You don't need to explain anything. I understand everything. 8 months. Clara, your divorce plans, your opinions about my intelligence, all the lies. David sank into the chair opposite her, the fight draining out of him as he recognized the trap he'd constructed around himself. How long have you known? Elena switched back to English, her voice carrying new authority. Since the company party 3 weeks ago. When you and Clara discussed my bedroom performance and your plans to leave me financially ruined. She gestured to the evidence spread across the coffee table. Bank statements, photographs, communication records, corporate expense reports. I know about the company money you've been stealing. I know about the jewelry you bought her with our joint account. I know about every restaurant, every hotel, every lie you've told me for 8 months. David's hands clenched and unclenched as he processed the scope of his exposure. What do you want? I want you to understand that the woman you've been lying to no longer exists. The naive wife who trusted your business trip stories, who believed your romantic gestures were genuine, who accepted your assessment of her intelligence, she died 3 weeks ago. Elena's voice remained calm, but steel ran beneath the surface. I want you to know that every assumption you made about me was wrong. David tried denial first, then anger, then bargaining. Elena watched his emotional spiral with the detached interest of someone observing a scientific experiment. His panic revealed the fundamental weakness she'd never noticed before. David was a man who crumbled when his carefully maintained illusions were stripped away. I love you, he finally said, the words desperate and hollow. I made mistakes, but I love you. We can work through this. You love the idea of me, Elena corrected. The supportive wife who gave up her career. The cultural consultant who helped your business relationships. The convenient American citizen who funded your lifestyle. You don't love me, David. You don't even know me. Her phone rang. Clara calling David's number. Elena answered it, speaking Czech with conversational ease. Ahoj, Claro. David je ZDE, ale je trochu zaneprázdněný. Chcete nechat vzkaz? Hello, Clara. David is here, but he's a bit busy. Would you like to leave a message? The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds before Clara whispered, Oh my God, and ended the call. That was cruel, David said weakly. That was honest. Something you might try. Elena leaned forward, her expression becoming businesslike. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign divorce papers that give me fair compensation for supporting your career, while you plan to leave me with nothing. You're going to resign from Innovate Tech before they fire you for expense fraud. And you're going to do it quietly, without drama or public spectacle. David's mouth opened to protest, but Elena held up a hand. In exchange, I won't destroy you completely. The evidence I have could end your career permanently, make you unemployable in tech, possibly result in criminal charges. I could ruin Clara's life just as thoroughly. But I'm choosing not to. Why? The question was barely audible. Elena considered the answer, thinking of Marie's wisdom about choosing healing over destruction, of Isabella's concerns about losing herself to revenge, of Victor's warning about the bitter taste of ashes. Because I'm not interested in becoming the kind of person who deals in destruction. Because I want to build something better from the pieces of this marriage. And because you're not worth becoming someone I'd hate. She slid divorce papers across the coffee table, the legal documents already prepared by Victor with terms that were fair but firm. Sign them, David. End this with whatever dignity you have left. David stared at the papers for a long moment, his shoulders sagging with the weight of his miscalculations. When he finally signed, his signature was shaky but decisive. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now you pack your things and find somewhere else to stay. Now you figure out how to rebuild your life without lying to yourself about who you are. Now you learn the difference between love and convenience." Elena gathered the signed papers with steady hands. "And now I get to discover who I am when I'm not trying to be someone else's idea of perfect." David left that night with 2 suitcases and the wreckage of his carefully constructed deceptions. Elena watched from their apartment window as he loaded his car, feeling something she hadn't expected. Not triumph, but relief. The war was over, and she'd chosen to win it by becoming someone she could respect rather than someone she feared. The woman who'd discovered her husband's betrayal 3 weeks ago would have been destroyed by this confrontation. The woman she'd become, stronger, wiser, no longer willing to disappear into someone else's expectations, felt ready to begin building something authentic from the foundation of her own strength. Prague's lights twinkled beyond the Vltava, and for the first time in months, Elena saw them as symbols of possibility rather than imprisonment. Her real life was about to begin. The divorce proceedings moved with the efficient brutality of well-organized warfare. David, faced with the choice between cooperation and complete destruction, chose cooperation. Victor handled the legal machinery with surgical precision, while Elena rebuilt her life with the same methodical approach she'd used to dismantle her marriage. 2 weeks after David's departure, Elena stood in their former apartment, now solely hers, surrounded by boxes and the detritus of a shared life. Everything connected to David was going to charity or storage. Everything that belonged to Elena Martinez, not Elena Novak, was being carefully preserved and reorganized. "You're keeping the piano," Victor observed, running his fingers across the keys of the baby grand that had been David's anniversary gift 3 years ago. "I'm keeping the music," Elena corrected. "I bought this piano with money from a consulting contract David thought was just a hobby. Turns out, I'm actually quite good at what I do when I'm not pretending to be ornamental." Victor smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious features. Their relationship had evolved beyond attorney-client into something more complex and promising. He understood Elena's need to rebuild herself completely before committing to anyone else's expectations. Elena's phone buzzed. Isabella calling from JFK Airport. "I'm boarding in 20 minutes, Isabella announced without preamble. 3 days in Prague to make sure my sister hasn't lost her mind completely. Fair warning, I'm bringing tequila and a lot of opinions about your life choices." "Looking forward to it," Elena replied, and meant it. Isabella's visit would provide the grounding she needed, a connection to who she'd been before David's deceptions and her own transformation. After ending the call, Elena found Victor studying a photograph she'd kept, herself at 28, accepting a United Nations fellowship that she'd ultimately declined to follow David to Prague. "Regrets?" he asked. "Lessons," Elena replied. "I was talented enough to earn that fellowship, intelligent enough to succeed in international relations, strong enough to build my own career. But I convinced myself that love meant making myself smaller so David could feel larger. And now?" Elena moved to the window overlooking Prague's ancient skyline, the city that had become her home in ways she'd never expected. "Now I know the difference between supporting someone's dreams and disappearing into them." The doorbell interrupted her contemplation. Marie Novikova stood in the hallway carrying a plate of homemade kolache and wearing the expression of someone who'd survived enough endings to recognize new beginnings. "Jack Saisidis? How are you feeling?" "Svobodna," Elena replied. "Free." Marie nodded approvingly as they settled in the living room. "David came to see me yesterday. He wanted me to convince you to reconcile." "And?" "I told him that wise women don't return to cages, even comfortable ones." Marie's eyes sparkled with satisfaction. He didn't understand the metaphor. But then, he never understood much about women. Over tea and pastries, Marie shared stories about rebuilding her life after her first husband's betrayal during the war. Her second marriage had been built on mutual respect and genuine partnership, a relationship Elena was finally ready to understand. "Victor, j'ai dobry muz," Marie said as they cleared the tea service. Victor is a good man. I know, but I need to be a complete person before I can be half of a partnership. Elena's Czech had become fluent enough for complex emotional discussions. Another skill David had unknowingly helped her develop. Modra odpověď. Laska je lepší, když přichází ze síly, ne ze slabosti. A wise answer. Love is better when it comes from strength, not weakness. That evening, Elena and Victor walked through Prague's old town, their conversation ranging from legal strategies to personal dreams, to the future they might build together when Elena was ready. The city felt different now. Not a place where she'd hidden from her own ambitions, but a home where she could flourish authentically. Clara resigned from Innovate Tech, Victor mentioned as they paused on Charles Bridge. Apparently the stress of the investigation and David's downfall became too much. She's returning to Brno. Elena felt a surprising pang of sympathy for the younger woman. Clara had been calculating and cruel, but she'd also been David's victim in a different way, used for his ego while believing herself to be his salvation. I hope she learned something from this, Elena said. About not building your life on someone else's lies. Very philosophical for someone who just won a war. Elena laughed, the sound carrying across the Vltava like music. I didn't win a war, Victor. I won myself back. The next morning brought Isabella's arrival and the chaos that always accompanied Elena's younger sister. Isabella emerged from customs looking like an immigration lawyer who dressed for battle. Sharp suit, sharper expression, ready to defend her sister against all comers, including herself. You look. Isabella paused, studying Elena's face carefully. Different, stronger, but also more peaceful. Like you've been through fire and came out purified instead of burned. They spent the day walking through Prague while Elena showed her sister the city she'd learned to love authentically. Isabella met Victor over dinner, subjecting him to the kind of interrogation that would have intimidated most men. Victor handled it with amused competence, recognizing Isabella's protectiveness as a sign of the family bonds that had helped shape Elena's character. He's good for you, Isabella admitted later as they sat in Elena's apartment sharing tequila and sister talk. Not because he rescues you, but because he matches you. You're both strong enough to be yourselves together. I'm not ready for together yet, Elena said. I spent 5 years being who David needed me to be. I want to spend some time being who I need me to be. Isabella raised her glass in a toast. To Elena Martinez, who remembered she was never meant to be anybody's supporting character, the tequila burned, but in a good way. Like phoenix flames that destroyed old limitations and revealed new possibilities. Elena was finally ready to write her own story in her own voice, in whatever language felt most authentic. Prague's lights twinkled beyond her windows like promises waiting to be kept. 6 months later, Elena stood before 300 cultural attachés, business leaders, and diplomats in Prague's municipal house, delivering the opening address for the Central European Cultural Exchange Summit. Her voice carried confidence earned through trial by fire, her words flowing seamlessly between English, Czech, and Spanish, as she facilitated conversations that would have intimidated her former self. Cultural understanding, she said to the rapt audience, begins with the courage to see beyond our assumptions about others and ourselves. When we learn someone's language, we don't just acquire vocabulary, we gain access to entirely new ways of thinking. Victor watched from the back of the ornate hall, his expression carrying pride that had nothing to do with legal victories. Elena had built something remarkable from the ashes of her marriage, a consulting firm that specialized in complex international cultural negotiations, with clients throughout Eastern Europe and growing interest from American companies seeking authentic cultural bridges. During the lunch break, Elena moved through the crowd with the natural diplomacy that had always been her strength. She'd learned to trust her instincts again, to value her intelligence without apology, to command respect through competence rather than accommodation. Mrs. Martinez, a familiar voice called from across the reception hall. Elena turned to find David approaching, looking older and smaller than she remembered. He'd lost the corporate polish that had once defined him, his expensive suit unable to hide the defeat in his shoulders. David. Elena's voice was neutral, neither warm nor cold. She felt Victor's presence nearby but didn't need his protection. David no longer had the power to destabilize her world. I wanted to apologize, David said awkwardly. And to tell you, what you've built here, it's impressive. I always knew you were talented, But I never realized. You never realized I was capable of succeeding without you, Elena finished gently. It's all right, David. We both learned things about ourselves these past months. David nodded, his eyes carrying genuine regret. Clara and I, we're not together anymore. Turns out relationships built on deception don't survive scrutiny. Elena felt sympathy for both of them. Two people who'd confused excitement with love, secret meetings with genuine connection. Their affair had been as much about ego and fantasy as her marriage had been about comfortable illusions. I hope you find something real, Elena said, meaning it. Something built on honesty instead of convenience. After David left, Elena returned to her summit responsibilities, but the encounter had crystallized something she'd been feeling for weeks. She was ready. Not to return to who she'd been, but to become who she was meant to be, including the possibility of love that enhanced rather than diminished her. That evening, the summit's closing reception took place in a private gallery overlooking Prague Castle. Elena had changed into a deep blue dress that complemented her dark hair and new confidence. She moved through conversations about art, culture, and international cooperation with the ease of someone who'd found her authentic voice. Victor appeared at her side as the evening wound down, offering champagne and the smile that had become wonderfully familiar over the past months. Successful summit, he observed. The Czech Minister of Culture seemed particularly impressed with your proposal for the youth exchange program. It's a good idea. Young people learning multiple languages, experiencing different cultures, building bridges instead of walls. Elena accepted the champagne, their fingers brushing in the exchange. I never could have imagined this 6 months ago. Which part? The professional success or the personal growth? Elena considered the question, looking out at Prague's illuminated skyline, the city that had witnessed her transformation from betrayed wife to successful entrepreneur, from hidden victim to confident leader. All of it. The woman David was married to couldn't have organized this summit, couldn't have commanded this kind of respect, couldn't have built something this meaningful. She turned to face Victor fully. But she also couldn't have recognized what you and I have together. Victor's expression grew serious. And what do we have together? A partnership between equals. Intellectual compatibility. Emotional honesty. The possibility of love that makes both of us stronger instead of requiring one of us to become smaller. Elena's voice carried certainty, earned through experience. Something I'm finally ready to explore fully. Victor set down his champagne and cupped Elena's face in his hands, his touch gentle but sure. I've been waiting for you to be ready, not because I needed to rescue you, but because I wanted to love the complete version of who you are. When they kissed, it was with the passion of two people who'd chosen each other not from need or convenience, but from recognition of equal strength and complementary dreams. Miluji te, Victor whispered against her lips. Te amo también, Elena replied, then switched to English. I love you too. The 3 languages of her heart. Czech, for the country that had become home. Spanish, for the culture that shaped her. English, for the professional world she was conquering. Elena had learned that love, like language, was richer when it drew from multiple sources of strength. Later, as they walked through Prague's cobblestone streets toward the apartment Elena had made truly her own, she reflected on the unexpected gifts her marriage's destruction had brought. Self-knowledge, professional fulfillment, the understanding that the best revenge wasn't destroying those who'd wronged her, but building something so authentic and successful that their betrayal became irrelevant. What are you thinking about? Victor asked, noting her contemplative silence. How sometimes losing everything you thought you wanted is the only way to discover everything you actually need. Prague's ancient buildings stretched around them, witnesses to centuries of human drama, wars and reconciliations, betrayals and new beginnings, the endless cycle of destruction and renewal that defined both cities and lives. Elena Martinez had learned to speak the language of survival, of strength, of authentic love. And in finding her voice, she discovered that her real story was just beginning. The city lights twinkled like stars, and Elena walked toward them with confidence, speaking the languages of her choosing, building the life of her dreams, finally and completely herself. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.